Join us now, ladies and gentlemen.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Tokyo on Fire. Today is Inside Baseball, where we get into the nitty-gritty of certain topical issues. Today we're going to talk about the Prime Minister's new cabinet. He reshuffled less than a week ago. He packed in 6 brand new ministers with portfolio, and the rest are seasoned politicians. Michael Cucek, you've been watching this too.
I was really fascinated by the process and also by the eventual outcome of this. It really didn't go the way I thought it would, and I have to say he did a pretty good job.
The numbers kicked up. His approval rating shot up, what, 6 points, 5 points?
It depends on the poll in which you look at. The ones that were taken just after the new cabinet was announced saw jumps up to 9 points in terms of the popularity of the cabinet. The ones taken later in the weekend, there was the euphoria had already started to die down, possibly because of Esaki Tetsuma's gaffe over the weekend about what he would and would not do as a cabinet member. But we can get into him later.
Right.
Overall, it's an interesting mix of folks. It's unfortunately really male. There were only 2 women in the cabinet, and this push for womenomics, for this pushing women, or the Shine initiative, letting women shine, it's not reflected in the numbers. He did put in a very prominent female critic of his, Noda Seiko, in a big ministry that formerly was held by a woman, Takaichi Sanae. It's now headed, the Ministry of General Affairs is now headed by not an ally of the Prime Minister, but basically a rival, the only person who even dared run against him the last time he was up for presidency of the LDP. Right. So it's going to be interesting there because that's the ministry that's in charge of local administration and makes sure that the yen goes out to all of the municipalities and the prefectures. That's a really powerful position, and to have a non-ally there is a really interesting choice on the part of the PM.
To be clear, I mean, to our viewers as well, we don't have really a horse in this race. We're not clamoring to see the Prime Minister fall. We're not, supporting him and he should be our guy to go with.
We don't go either way on that.
We're observers, and this is keenly interesting for us. We don't want to see the government fail. We don't want to see the Prime Minister fail because the economy is so closely intertwined with what's going on in Nagatacho.
Oh, and not only just the economy, but just Japan's place in the world. That it's a well-governed country is really of great interest to us. In terms of governing, I think the really big change will be in a ministry that very few people have been talking about, which is the Health, Labor, and Welfare Ministry. Under Shiozaki Yasuhisa, again, a friend of Abe, it was neither here or there, but it's a huge ministry. It controls 1/3 of the entire budget, and it controls the world's largest pension fund. It is an immensely important place, and thank goodness and gosh darn it, Abe put in Kato Katsunobu, the guy who was running the 100 million initiative, put him in there. He knows everything and anything having to do with the social issues about women working, the issues of how pensions get worked into all this, of work-life balance. All of these issues will be in the hands of someone who is immensely competent, a former bureaucrat who then switched over to the politician side. I'm seeing that's going to be a great position, and there will be no chance of any embarrassment coming out of there.
One of the things that Mr. Suga, Chief Cabinet Secretary, has obviously told everybody is you watch your P's and Q's. There's no scandals, there's no sleeping around, there's no slips of the tongue. He is probably looking at the finance minister as he was saying that.
Oh, slips of the tongue are Taro Aso's stock and trade. He's there oftentimes for comic relief. But I think that he's going to get a message that if we're going to keep this ball rolling, which, given the fact that he now controls the second largest faction, he may or may not want to do. And we have to talk about how the factions fared in all of this. I tend to look at this cabinet reshuffle as the bribery reshuffle.
Because there are so many people waiting for their turn, right?
That's right. There's so many people who are waiting for their turn, and yet they kept it down to 6 newcomers.
Right.
And there are 10 times as many members of the Diet who are eligible
to
come in.
There are at least 60.
They said, that's it. You get your slice of 1/3 of the seats, but everything else is going to go
The rest
out.
of you guys, you wait. We'll do
wait.
it again.
We'll do it again sometime. Who knows? Instead, they put in veterans who have been many times in different positions to fill out these posts and to absolutely, there will be no more embarrassments.
We want stability. We don't want surprise. We want to keep this machine going, and we need to get those cabinet approval ratings up.
And the reason why I call it bribery is because the faction that made out with the biggest slice is the Kishida
made
faction,
out
which
like
is
a bandit.
supposedly the faction that is preparing for a takeover from the Seiwa Kai. And what Abe has brilliantly done is say, look, stick with me and you'll get more cabinet positions than if your guy was prime minister. And I'm sure they've done the math. They say, yes, that's right. If Kishida were PM, we couldn't take as many cabinet seats.
Right.
But we've cleared it out. And Aso's faction got 3, which is, considering that it's the number 2 faction in terms of numbers, that it only got 3 seats is a bit of a shortfall. But it's indicating that there are all kinds of balancing acts and that Abe took those into account and did not put forward his own faction's interests. He pulled way back on the numbers from his own faction, did not put in his friends.
Yeah.
He pulled his friends out for the most part. And so we have a cabinet of competent folks for this period of time that's stretching all the way until next September when Abe comes up for re-election as president of the LDP.
Oh, Komeito got one.
Oh, well, Komeito always gets one. It used to love to have the health and welfare ministry, but it shifted over to infrastructure. Why they would want to have direct control over hundreds of contractors and subcontractors, I don't know.
I don't know either.
I have no idea why they would ever want to be in charge of passing money around the country. But there they have it. They're
Isn't
back.
that where Tanaka got his start? The construction industry.
But in this case, it's been merged with MLIT is now a whole bunch of things, including tourism. So that's their ministry, and they've hung on to it, which means that the national Komeito LDP relationship is still there, which is very important for understanding what Abe's other problem, aside from the faction leaders and the moves by Kishida within his party, but that person who's outside it, Koike. Koike Yuriko and her party, which has just established its national...
This morning it was announced.
This morning it announced, I think it's Nippon.
Nippon First.
Nippon First Association, Nokai. When they get to all the way up to a party, they'll change it to party. But they started their...
But that crank is starting to turn, isn't it?
And he's looking at that and saying, okay, how do I deal with them? And the most important job one is keeping the Komeito close on the national level. And it seems as though that relationship is solid.
Right. What are the surprises that we can look forward to? Are there any blips in the cabinet lineup? And this is, I'm sorry, a loaded question, I apologize. But is there anybody in there that maybe is a favorite target as this guy is going to be the first one to screw up?
The one that everyone talked about, and they found a way to target him over the weekend.
Here, kitty.
Is Esaki Tetsuma. It looks suspicious. He's been in politics forever, but didn't get his start in politics. Dad wouldn't let him be his own secretary. At first, he had to be the personal secretary for about a decade for the head of the Shorin Kempo.
How about that?
Shorinji Kempo Association, the guy who founded Shorinji Kempo. So he has a weird resume. And he's 73, and it's the first time he's up for a cabinet spot. And everyone's saying, this one's the corker. And over the weekend, he wanted to reassure supporters that he would not embarrass them. So he embarrassed them. He said, I will avoid embarrassment by simply reading what it is that the bureaucrats tell me to say.
You're my man.
The news media
jumped on that.
Jumped on that. It's on the front pages everywhere because if they don't need a politician in the cabinet seat if that person doesn't have anything
Right.
to say to the bureaucrats. They could just have the bureaucrats appear. What's the point of having a minister?
Well, I think that just reveals what the terror is at that level. Don't go out on a limb. Don't express your own ideas on issues. Rely on the bureaucrats to spoon feed.
Well, it also has to do with the recent history, with Matsuno at education, with Inada
Right.
at defense, talking off the top of their heads and saying whatever, and then having to retract what they say. He was saying that I will be careful, but he said it in such a way. Okay, everyone had their radar on for him, and we're just waiting for him to say something that was in the least bit questionable. So he was not going to get the benefit of the doubt, and he didn't. But beyond that, it's really hard to see who's going to be a screw-up. There are, even among the neophytes, for example, there's the new Minister of the Environment. He's 70. It's his first ministerial post. No. He was the top bureaucrat in the Environment Ministry when he retired. He was the Jimujikang. And so he's just going back to his own ministry. He knows it backwards and forwards. Oh, there's a young guy over at Ag and over at Science. No. Agriculture, I'm sorry.
Norincha.
Yeah, the Norin. He's a former bureaucrat there too. So that there's really very, very little of the Friends of Abe effect that we saw in the previous cabinet that turned out in the end to be his downfall.
Michael, since this is inside baseball, let's talk a little bit about this more broadly. When the cabinet is reshuffled, it's not just the cabinet. There are vice ministerial positions, and there are also positions within the party, within the LDP, that also change in lockstep with this change. So first they have the cabinet reshuffle, and all of these discussions have been going on, and I think they were still horse trading throughout Thursday because it took a long time for them to finally announce, and they kind of trickled out who the appointments were for various cabinet seats. But then we had to wait 2 more days for the LDP positions and the sub.
Yeah, that was really
positions.
Weird, very, very difficult to understand, and quite new order of action, where we basically knew what the cabinet was before it was announced, which is there's always a desire to have a surprise, a surprise jinji, as they say. No surprise jinji, no surprises at all. The things that everybody knew
Trickled out
over the period of time up to the cabinet announcement, there was nothing that was contrary to what had been leaked before. But the Secretariat, however, was not discussed. The one idea, it was not clear that Kishida was moving out until very, very late, and that he would be moving into the very, very interesting position of being the Policy Research Council chairman. But that also that Hosoda, the faction leader of Mr. Abe, would be pulled out of the Sombukai, and instead Takeshita would be put in. That switch of pulling out of the Seiwa-kai from having control over the General Council, that is a big sacrifice, I think. And it should be noted that that's going to have ripple effects for the finance community, because Hosoda, of course, was Mr. Point Man for the casino bills. And everybody's asking, well, what happens to the casino follow-up bills? Well, with Hosoda not in charge of what gets said at the general meeting, oh, sure, he can talk at the general meeting. Anybody can. But the chairman is no longer the point man for that movement. How these IR integrated resorts will finally get approved, even after the Yokohama election, where the supporter of the IR won, Mayor Hayashi won re-election. Nevertheless, it's going to change that aspect of Abenomics that a lot of international observers have been keeping an eye on.
Well, I think it's very clever of the Prime Minister, and it's probably not just the Prime Minister. It's other people that are in his inner circle are parsing this out, because as we look at it, as you examine it, it does help you understand what the priorities are. And probably the first priority for this Prime Minister right now is circle the wagons. Let's keep it nice and tight. Let's keep it polished. And let's do our job so that we can bring these numbers up methodically and slowly so that we can continue the Abe march.
Yeah, the ideologues, the persons that were pushing constitutional revision, have all been pushed into still high status positions, but they're nowhere near the decision-making process. And Mr. Abe himself has said, post the announcement, constitutional revision is not a major priority for the fall.
Right.
And that's what was supposed to be the PR buildup for his reelection. Whole business of him with the fast announcement. These are the issues that I'd like to see when he did that on Constitution Day to the hand-picked audience of the Nippon Kaigi in that video. This was all supposed to be a big PR push, winning him a third term in office, changing the Constitution, placing his flag in history. He's really done something that no one else could do. No, not really. Let's just let me just be prime minister. That's fine for me.
One of the things that I thought was really great of him is he was on TV all day Saturday, all day Sunday. He hit all of the networks. He hit all of the programs. He was on NHK. And he's out there and he's talking and he's taking the hits. Kake Gakuin and Moritomo. It won't go away. How much weight does that have dragging him down continually now? Can it be resolved? Can he kind of put that behind him and put it to bed? Some other documents surfaced over the weekend too.
Yeah, but the thing is, I agree with the general gist that the idea that he'll be back up in the 50% range in terms of his cabinet support numbers is farcical. What I see is that he's going to fight for the 30 to 40% support range. And that's where he's going to be comfortable, maybe going up a few points above 40. But no, we're not going to see that high level of support that we saw before. The internal dynamics of the numbers are still the same. Those who support him more than half of the time because they see no alternative.
Right.
And we have Koike as the alternative appearing on the side and just beyond their view, but she's there.
Right.
That there is an alternative. Though the DP, the Democratic Party, is prostrate on the floor, it's trying to pick a new leader. Hosono Goshi has told the party that I'm leaving. Didn't tell his supporters that, but that's
and it just
classic.
Kind of flew out of his mouth, didn't it?
That's classic Hosono, timing completely off. But they're prostrate, and normally when you have an opposition as completely disabled as Abe has now, call that election. Push the party to recognize that you are the leader that brings them goodies.
Are you endorsing that?
I'm not endorsing that. And I think that what he's done instead by building this cabinet of power and again, as you say, circling the wagons, that this is let me just persevere on. It's going to be tough, but we're going to make it all the way to September next year, and then you can pass your judgment upon me then.
Yeah, I think what he did with Kishida is really instructive because when Inada fell out, he made Kishida not only the foreign minister, but the minister of defense. And it only lasted for a week. But I thought that was really a very clever move. And then when he reshuffled the cabinet, Kishida was gone and he was Seiyo Kaicho. And he's inside the party now. He's one of the top dogs that are kind of controlling how the party is actually run. And that will keep him quiet and keep him, part of the inner circle now. And I think that the prime minister is determined to get those numbers up past 50. And so he's going to look for an opportunity. And I think you might be surprised.
I'm not sure. I don't think that there is the possibility of him
The history shows us, you're right, that coming up from a deficit like that is just incredibly difficult.
It's incredibly difficult. And also, how did he pull off his last burst in terms of popularity? It was by latching on very closely to the early weeks and months of the Trump presidency. Solving Trump, flatter him, go visit him.
First one there.
Be the first, be the one who is effusive in how wonderful your golf game is, sir.
Right.
I'm so glad I'm playing you because it just shows I'm a duffer. Playing to his worst instincts, and winning some breathing room for Japan in terms of the Japan-U.S. relationship. And everybody, even his critics, said, brilliant. But I don't think there's anything left in that relationship. I'm certain there's nothing left in the Putin relationship. There's nothing that Putin is willing to give that Abe is willing to win. And so the foreign policy inflator is not there. That's not going to push the numbers up like it did in the early part of this year.
Jumping out of the tube in Rio was kind of nice.
That was true, but he only gets to do that once.
That's true. But he is a man on a mission, and he's going to look for these opportunities, and where they might come up, he might be in a position to gamble and say, I don't know if it's going to work, but I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to capture this one as my initiative. He's tried that in the past. He's
tried that in the past, but I don't see where the historical issues are. What, a rapprochement with China?
North Korea?
A sudden North Korea deal?
Well, there's a lot going on with North Korea and Tillerson and overtures that are made. You know, if you just stop shooting those things up, maybe we have an issue we can talk about.
It's a very difficult, and of course, Koizumi did have a huge uptick in his numbers when he made the dramatic visit to Pyongyang, even though there was the backlash and the aftermath of finding out that so many of the abductees were dead.
Right.
And that nevertheless, it did help.
Careful what you wish for.
It did extend Koizumi's term in office in ways that many people probably don't appreciate. But I don't see anything that Abe can do.
Consumption tax.
Okay, there's another one. That's one where I think he's sticking it to Kishida. He's promising to raise the tax that is going to have a terrible effect upon Japan's economic expansion. It's just happened every time, and in fact, he's delayed the tax rise twice.
Yes.
And gone to the polls asking for the people's okay on doing that. Now he says, I absolutely will raise the consumption tax from 8% to 10% on schedule this time. And
why is that pushing it off on Kishida?
Well, Kishida's the policy guy, and it will be Kishida's job to
make it work,
make it sound reasonable, and make members of the party say, yes, we
are behind that.
Exactly what we're for.
Looking for cover.
Yeah. There's no way to order. In the case of, the entire point of Abenomics has been, let's not be conservative, let's be immoral, money splurging, devaluing, just complete drunken sailors when it comes to economic policy, and get the economy going like a big party.
That worked for like 6 months.
Oh no, but when one tries to think, if there had been retrenchment, if there had been any kind of European style, no, we have to cut back on the budget. We have to have hard money.
We have to pay the piper now.
We have to, that would have really killed the economic expansion, and it is an economic expansion. We have more people employed than ever before.
Well, duh.
And the ratio of jobs available to people seeking jobs is the highest it's ever been.
Of course.
And there is a great deal of pressure in terms of it's either wages have to go up or immigration has to go up. One of the two, we don't have a choice here. Right. This kind of atmosphere,
which once again is this interesting mix with Konotara's foreign minister, and he's a proponent of increased immigration, right? And this
something might be worked out there, right. But all of this, he is about to he's going to take the emergency brake. He's got it in fifth gear, and he's going to yank on the emergency brake to see what happens.
Yeah, I don't know. He changed his mind the last time, just at the last minute.
Well, we'll see how it goes.
Inside Baseball, where we delve into the really critical issues. The Prime Minister just reshuffled his cabinet. That's what we've been discussing today. Please stay tuned.
He who breaks the rules goes back to the house of pain.